This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. The protests are continuing in Kenosha, Wisconsin and Portland, Oregon, with concern growing across the country today. In Portland, Oregon, state police are returning to help after the fatal shooting of a man following clashes between Trump supporters and counter-protesters over the weekend. Last night, protesters were back on the streets and authorities arrested 29 people. The mayor is calling on people to stay away and help de-escalate the situation.
All of us must take a stance against violence. And it doesn't matter who you are or what your politics are. We have to all stop the violence.
The Portland mayor has also blamed the president for contributing to the violence in the country. In Kenosha, Wisconsin, police have arrested 175 people involved in protests since the shooting of Jacob Blake on August 23rd. Protesters have been marching every night, but police say most of those arrested were not Kenosha residents. The president plans to visit Kenosha tomorrow, although the governor of Wisconsin is urging him not to, fearing more unrest. Meanwhile, presidential candidate Joe Biden is campaigning in Pittsburgh today, where he is charging that the president is contributing to the violence in the streets. And Dr. Ed Stetzer is the executive director of the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton College. He joins us now to talk about how the church can be responding to these turbulent times. Dr. Stetzer, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're witnessing unrest in so many cities right now, and I think many believers are just really unsure about how to respond. What is your encouragement to pastors and people in the pews who are trying to think through just what kind of posture to take right now or what to do?
Well, we're seeing a time of unprecedented division in our country, and it's an opportunity for followers of Jesus to show and share the love of Jesus, to speak up, I think, on issues that might speak to some of the division in the moment, to show and share the love of Jesus to our neighbor. The reality is we're seeing our country starting to fragment, to tear apart, maybe already been evident in the last few years, but becoming even more so now. I think ultimately a united church that's showing and sharing the love of Jesus in this time will be key for our future.
And I think a lot of people this week, too, are digesting the conventions, the political conventions of the last 2 weeks. We've been watching both parties reach out to people of faith. And I'm wondering, from your standpoint, what have you heard from each of the parties that you like, and what would you like to hear more of? Let's start with the Democrats.
Well, certainly we heard a lot. As a matter of fact, it was a very distinctly religiously targeted convention. I saw some more left-leaning Democrats talk about that they were disappointed this was geared towards moderates, white moderates, and people of religious faith. The reality is, statistically, the less one goes to church, the more likely one is to be a Democrat, the more likely they are to be a Republican. That's just a statistical reality. Please don't send me mail. But the point is that the God gap is what Democrat pollsters have typically called this, is pretty big and significant. And I think ultimately that Joe Biden and their faith campaign has a significant journey to go, particularly because so many people of faith are pro-life, are concerned about religious liberty, and more. So I think we saw not the typical very high-level emphasis on abortion, which we saw, if you go back 2 conventions ago, was mentioned 22 times, to cheering each of those 22 times, leading actually Cokie Roberts, NPR commentator, to mention about the over-the-top obsession with abortion. Here we saw that downplayed. We saw the concerns of religious voters highlighted. I would say the Democratic campaign will have some challenges to engage, particularly evangelical or Catholic, practicing Catholic religious voters, but they certainly made an effort in the convention 2 weeks ago.
So interesting. And then on the Republican side, of course, another more outreach to people of faith as well. What did you see that stood out to you, and what are you hoping to hear in the weeks ahead?
Yeah, I would say it was stunning. The Republican convention was stunning in its focus. I mean, considering that religious conservatives have always found their place in the last few decades in the Republican Party, the focus on religious conservatives was overwhelming and evident, and in a way that we haven't seen in past conventions as well. And I think people of faith hear things about religious liberty, resonate with that, hear things about life, resonate with that. As a person of faith, I would like to hear more about immigrants and refugees. I'd like to hear more about what a just society looks like in addressing issues of of systemic racism and more. But I would say certainly it was kind of a love letter to the RNC, was a love letter to conservative evangelicals saying, please don't leave. I would say there's some issues that weren't addressed that I wish were addressed, but I think it probably resonated with a lot of conservative evangelicals.
Well, I know so many people are watching this election really like no other, and especially people of faith. Dr. Ed Stetzer, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Be sure to tune into Faith Nation this evening for the latest from our nation's capital. In Louisiana today, thousands of people are still without power, water, or transportation. It's after what the governor calls, quote, the strongest storm to ever strike the state. Chuck Holton brings us this report from the hard-hit city of Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Cleanup operations are well underway across southern Texas and Louisiana in the wake of Hurricane Laura. While visiting the region Saturday, President Trump echoed the surprise many people expressed at the tremendous power of the storm when it hit.
This was almost coming in at a 5. It was a 5 a little bit out offshore, and you came in as a 4, but 150 mile an hour was up to 185 at one point. I don't know that we've ever seen that.
And like everything else this year, response has been affected by the COVID crisis.
Being a good neighbor means doing all the things you would normally do during a storm, just doing it from 6 feet away and with a mask on. Because we still are the state in the country with the most cases per capita. We still have tremendous challenges from COVID.
The governor's receiving criticism from residents about putting too much emphasis on the threat posed by the virus as opposed to this incredibly deadly storm. Especially in poor communities, people rely on local emergency shelters to help them survive not only during the storm but afterwards. And by closing all of them down and encouraging people to go to hotels in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, many people didn't have the wherewithal to do that, and now they say they've been abandoned.
We don't have water. The water is off in Lake Charles, they tell me. So we drinking rainwater.
The Golden Arms Apartments is a subsidized living facility that houses about 400 residents over age 65. Most of them got out before the storm hit. But a lack of transportation resulted in 60 or so riding out the storm. Without a local shelter to go to, they were stuck without essential services.
The lights went out like 2 o'clock this morning of the hurricane.
Now left without power, water, or transportation, these residents aren't sure what will happen to them.
Golden Arms is a good place to stay, but since the tornado and hurricane or whatever it was, we don't have no sanitary over here. The water's off, the toilets won't work.
CBN's Operation Blessing scrambled to get some aid to the Golden Arms Apartments until they could be safely evacuated. But the hotels are already full of refugees, and that fact is also hindering responders coming to help with the cleanup, now unable to find anywhere to stay. The Louisiana National Guard has deployed hundreds of troops to help with the cleanup efforts. Captain Randy Bordeaux is the unit's chaplain.
Especially when they get back from being evacuated, they're going to come into a devastation. So anyway, we can give them a heads up and some encouragement. We're all in this together.
But Bordeaux says the greatest needs aren't food, water, or electricity.
Their biggest needs right now are definitely prayers for spiritual help and to know that God is here. He's present with us at all times. And God is our refuge, an ever-present help in a time of trouble, and anything we can give them to remind them that God has not left them, that He's here, is what we can do. Pray for it.
From Lake Charles, Louisiana, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Tough times. And now on to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. The U.S. is closing in on 6 million cases and reporting more than 183,000 deaths. This as California becomes the first state to surpass 700,000 cases. Meanwhile, colleges and universities are still struggling to control outbreaks. At Georgia Tech, the number of new COVID cases has more than doubled in just 8 days, jumping to 705. And in upstate New York, SUNY Oneonta is closing for 2 weeks after a spike in cases following a large party. Governor Andrew Cuomo is sending in what he calls a SWAT team of testers and tracers.
As we have such a high caseload, SUNY Upstate Medical has sent 3,000 tests to be able to test our students and our staff over the next few days. In addition, the governor is sending 70 contact tracers, has sent folks from the New York State Department of Health to assist.
For most colleges, students have only been back in class for 2 weeks. Well, overseas today, a milestone flight took place. It was the first ever Israeli flight direct to the United Arab Emirates, and it left Israel on Monday morning. Senior Trump advisor Jared Kushner and National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien are part of the delegation that will spend 2 days working on the details of the historic peace agreement between Israel and the UAE. The word peace was written in Arabic, Hebrew, and English on the nose of the Israeli El Al plane, which will fly over Saudi Arabia over the weekend. The UAE formally ended a decades-long boycott of Israel.
This opens the door for what I can only call unbridled trade, tourism, investments, exchanges between the Middle East, two most advanced economies. And you will see how the sparks fly on this.
The UAE is the third Arab country to make peace with the Jewish state. Coming up, the decision on how many refugees to allow into the U.S. next year. That's looming. How will it impact the country and those refugees hoping to enter?
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Between now and October 1st, the Trump administration must decide how many refugees to allow into the U.S. next year. In the last 3 years, it has slashed the number dramatically. A report from Open Doors USA and World Relief in July showed a 90% reduction since 2015 in the number of Christian refugees the U.S. has resettled from countries where the church faces persecution. And we're joined now by Jen Smyers at Church World Service. She's the Director of Policy and Advocacy for its Immigration and Refugee Program. Jen, thanks for joining us today. Tell us about the impact in the last 4 years of this severe reduction of refugees coming to the U.S.
Well, that's right. Refugee resettlement numbers are now at an all-time low in the United States. And what that has meant is that people in harm's way who literally have no other option for safety, some have died. Some are still in harm's way. Many have been promised by the United States that they would be able to be reunited with their family members. These are people who have already been vetted, who have already been approved, who were supposed to come in 2017 and are still without safety, are still not with their families. And that's had a devastating impact for those individuals as well as for the communities, including churches across the United States that have pledged to welcome them.
Wow. Well, this administration regularly promotes events and programs that do encourage religious liberty. Why do you think it has closed the door to so many refugees, including so many Christians fleeing persecution?
It's really unclear because, like you've said, the administration has claimed to support people who are fleeing religious persecution, and yet with the numbers, we're seeing such few refugees coming in. There are only 946 Christians fleeing religious persecution resettled this year, which is the lowest it's ever been. There are only 13 Yazidis who are fleeing ISIS and the torture and trauma that they've endured. There are only 222 Muslim Rohingya refugees who are fleeing Burma. So those who are fleeing persecution are not being welcomed by the United States like they traditionally have been. And the Refugee Resettlement Program was set up to help these individuals. Churches came together with the government and decided to create this program. It's a strong program. And unfortunately, the administration has just chosen to not only not use it, but to dismantle it.
So, Jen, what are you hearing about what kind of decision the Trump administration might make this year? What is the conversation looking like at this point?
We don't have any indication of the numbers that they will set, but we certainly hope that they will take into account the tremendous economic contributions that refugees bring to the United States when they're resettled here. Right now, during this pandemic, there are more than 175,000 refugees who are working in the health sector. There are another 175,000 refugees working in the food supply industry, helping all of us when we need it most. And we're hoping that they'll take into consideration those pieces, as well as religious minorities, Hong Kong refugees who are pro-democracy protesters, and other populations who are really in desperate need of this care, as well as the many people of faith across the country who support this program and want to see it restored.
Okay, and speaking of restoration, I know the historic norm has been, say, 95,000. If the Trump administration were to decide to move back up to that level, what would that look like, given that so many agencies have had to close offices? Refugee resettlement agencies in the U.S. have had to close offices, lay off workers. What would that look like trying to even ramp up again?
Well, where there's a will, there's a way. And if the administration decided to restore this program, to rebuild it, to return it to those historic norms, there would be an investment required to really turn the lights back on internationally and domestically to make sure that we can again have this program that has taken churches and the government decades to build, has been dismantled in just a few short years. But that can be done with the political will, and we know that there's a will across the country from faith communities who've been doing this work for decades.
All right, Jen Smyers, definitely something to watch. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
After the break, Marvel's Black Panther fans are mourning the loss of the Hollywood actor who lost his battle to cancer Friday. But there's more to him than meets the eye. We'll take a look when we come back.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
The legacy of Chadwick Boseman extends far beyond his role as T'Challa in the iconic superhero film Black Panther. After Boseman passed away on Friday at age 43, his family revealed that he had been fighting colon cancer for 4 years. 2 years into his battle with cancer, Boseman delivered a commencement address to students at Howard University, reminding them that nothing can stand in the way of God's plan for their life.
When I dare to challenge the system that would relegate us to victims and stereotypes with no clear historical backgrounds, no hopes or talents, when I questioned that method of portrayal, a different path opened up for me. The path to my destiny. When God has something for you, it doesn't matter who stands against it. God will move someone that's holding you back away from a door and put someone there who will open it for you. If it's meant for you.
And joining us now from faithwire.com is Trey Goins-Phillips with more. Trey, so interesting to hear him talking about his faith there. How vocal was Chadwick Boseman about his faith during his time in the spotlight?
Yeah, he was very vocal about his faith. Not only did he speak about it at commencement, but he had relationships, friendships with other actors, and he would send text messages being encouraging to them. One of those instances was with Josh Gad. He just shared, he was obviously the actor who plays the voice of Olaf in the Frozen franchise. He showed text messages from Chadwick Boseman that were encouraging him to really take in God's simple creation, the beauty of God's simple creation in the midst of a pandemic. So even when he was away from the spotlight, Chadwick was still encouraging people and pointing them to his faith.
Oh, wow. That is really great to hear. Also, so interesting, the social media response to his death has just been overflowing the internet. Why do you think that people care so much about him?
I think not only did he embody so many iconic Black and African American heroes that are so beloved by not just the Black community but by America and the world around, he also is just a good person. He's someone that people had, like I mentioned about those offhanded behind the scenes communications with Josh Gad. He had relationships like that with a lot of people. He was himself in front of the camera and behind the camera. He was someone who had a lot of integrity in his personal life. And even in 2018, his childhood pastor praised him for that. He said, he's somebody that when I see him even now as a superstar celebrity, he's still the same Chad that I knew when he was singing in the choir as a child in Anderson, South Carolina.
Oh, wow. That is great to hear, especially in these times. How do you think he'll be remembered? What is his legacy going to be?
I think his legacy will certainly be one of, like I mentioned, advancing these stories of beloved African-American heroes, but also as someone who really honed his craft, and even at such a young age, who just had an illustrious career, who was a true success in entertainment, not only to advance quality entertainment, but to advance characters that had a lot of depth and a lot of meaning. He talked often about how he didn't just want to play a character well, but he wanted to highlight the redeeming qualities of a character, and if they weren't there when he got on board to be in a film or a TV show, he wanted to ensure that he left that mark on the character, and I think that's something that he absolutely has done, as we can see in Black Panther and in 42 when he played Jackie Robinson, and in Get On Up when he played James Brown.
That's really encouraging and very uplifting at a time when we all need uplifting stories. Thank you, Trey Goins-Phillips with FaithWire.
Thank you.
And be sure to watch Faith Wire on the CBN News Channel. That's tonight at 9:30 Eastern. Up next, how CBN's Operation Blessing is stepping in to help following the deadly explosion in Lebanon that left thousands in need.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Operation Blessing is partnering with Heart for Lebanon to provide much-needed items for victims of the recent explosion in Beirut. 190 people died in the August 4th blast, and more than 6,500 were hurt when highly explosive material detonated. The explosion left 300,000 people homeless, and it caused $15 billion in direct damage. Operation Blessing is working with local organizations, including 20 churches, to provide food and other supplies. CBN is also helping to refurbish homes damaged by the blast.
The Lebanese government has failed its own people, but the faith community in Lebanon has not. And the global body of Jesus Christ, along with the generous partnership of Operations Blessing and CBN, we are coming alongside every family that is hurting.
If you would like to lend a hand to Operation Blessing, you can give to the Disaster Relief Fund. You can call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. And that is it for this edition of CBN News Watch. We hope you have a great day.